remain uncounted. Virginia's governor-elect Glenn Youngkin telling Fox's Tucker Carlson tonight his win will bring changes to public education in the state.
Here we have in our schools a moment to stop teaching our children about their differences and start teaching them about the things that can bring us together and prepare them for a great life. And that's what we're going to do in our schools when I'm governor, is get our kids ready to actually go reach after the Virginia promise that we're going to make available to all kids in Virginia.
Youngkin has promised to ban the teaching of critical race theory in the schools the day he is inaugurated. The American Embassy in Ethiopia's capital city of Addis Ababa is telling its non-emergency embassy personnel they can leave if they feel unsafe there as the armed conflict continues between the Ethiopian government forces and the Tigray rebels. Northwest Indiana murder charges have been filed against a 23-year-old man who police say opened fire on trick-or-treaters Sunday, killing a 13-year-old boy and wounding another teenager. America is listening to Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services that you would choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Democrat leadership in the House preparing to move forward with a vote on President Biden's social spending plan without a complete report on its cost from the Congressional Budget Office. West Virginia Democrat Senator Joe Manchin says the House should pass the infrastructure bill instead.
There has to build some goodwill. Let them vote on the infrastructure bill. Take the time to work the reconciliation bill the way it needs to be worked, the CBO scoring, talking more about the effects it has all through our economy and all through people's lives.
Progressives in the House say they won't vote on the infrastructure bill until they're sure the social spending bill will win Senate approval. Senate Democrats have tried and failed again to push an election reform bill forward.
For the fourth time since the summer, Senate Democrats tried to advance a voting rights measure designed to reinstate pre-clearance of state voting laws.
Today's obstruction was only the latest in a series of disturbing turns for the Republican Party.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the Republican filibuster denying debate on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act was a low point. All but one Republican, Alaska's Lisa Murkowski, voted against the procedural motion.
In order to let Attorney General Garland dictate voting procedures, Democrats want to overturn Supreme Court precedent.
Republican leader Mitch McConnell warns of a federal power grab over state elections. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Hearing arguments Wednesday on New York's restrictive gun permit law, justices in the Supreme Court seemed ready to strike it down, but also expressed concerns that doing so could threaten gun restrictions in places like bars, public transportation, and sporting events. A ruling isn't expected until next summer. Federal prosecutors have recommended a prison sentence of nearly 4 years for a New Jersey gym owner who likely will be the first person to be sentenced for assaulting a law enforcement officer at the U.S. Capitol during the outbreak of violence on January 6th. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Celebrate Dad this Father's Day. Mezcla Bistro in Nagana is always happy to serve you and the family. We offer your local favorites to include herb-roasted prime rib and honey-glazed ham. Treat Dad to our special Sunday brunch buffet to enjoy free-flowing draft beer and sing along with Didi Uehara. Sunday, June 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Seating is limited, so call us at 479-2652 or 2653 to make your RSVP. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, I like to read the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution at the beginning of every show because it really typifies what the show is about. It's about the United States Constitution, individual rights, individual responsibilities, individual freedom, and the rule of law. So I oftentimes have an article that deals with the Second Amendment that I will put into the record at this point of the show. Today is one of those days. As you know, the Supreme Court is going to decide a case next week on whether or not a New York law that is what we used to refer to as a may issue jurisdiction as opposed to a shall issue jurisdiction. If a person living in New York who legally owns a firearm wants to carry it concealed, he has to apply to a public official who may, if he feels like it, issue a concealed carry permit. Doesn't have to, and there are no standards that govern the issuance or denial of these permits. Well, anytime you have a government benefit, entitlement, whatever, that depends on the unfettered discretion of a single official, it's just not a good deal. Because human nature being what it is, the official who has the ability to issue those permits might say, no, I'm not going to give one to Klitzkie. He's too tall. I don't like that. Yeah. If he were 6 inches shorter, I might give him one. It's an exaggeration, but not by much. So here's the article that ran in a website called The Hill. The Supreme Court seemed wary of a New York law that strictly limits the carrying of guns outside the home during arguments Wednesday in the first major Second Amendment clash in more than a decade. The conservative majority court posed sharp questions about the constitutionality of the New York regulation, which gives government officials broad discretion over the issuing of licenses to carry a concealed firearm. And here's a quote from Brett Kavanaugh. Why isn't it good enough to say, I live in a violent area and I want to be able to defend myself? Kavanaugh asked that of New York's Solicitor General. With any constitutional right, if it's up to the discretion of an individual officer, that seems inconsistent with an objective constitutional right. Absolutely. If it's up to the unfettered discretion of a public official, it's not a right. It's not a right at all. It's more along the lines of a favor. At issue in the case is New York's so-called proper cause law, which generally requires applicants to demonstrate a special need beyond a basic desire for self-defense to qualify for an unrestricted concealed carry license. New York is among 8 states in the District of Columbia that give wide discretion to licensing officials, and we did too. I think it was an Anthony Atta bill that came along and turned us from a may issue to a shall issue jurisdiction, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah. The dispute arose after 2 New York residents were denied unrestricted carry licenses. Backed by an affiliate of the National Rifle Association. Do we have a boo sound effect here, Jose? Yeah, backed by an affiliate of the National Rifle Association. Boo! Yeah, just thought I'd help the lefties out there, the gun grabbers, the lefties, etc., just to make it appear that I am impartial. But of course I'm not. Back as you were, the applicants sued the licensing officials, and after losing in the lower courts, appealed to the Supreme Court. Paul Clement, a former U.S. Solicitor General, also represented the gun license applicant on Wednesday, argued that New York's law violates the right to keep and bear arms enshrined in the Constitution. Quote, at the end of the day, I think what it means to give somebody a constitutional right is that they don't have to satisfy a government official that they really have a good need to exercise it, or they face atypical risks. Well, you know, you would have thought that we would have settled this particular kind of issue 100 years ago, but obviously we're still talking about it. The court's 3 liberal justices appeared to give a more sympathetic audience to the public safety rationale underlying New York's law, of course. I think that people of good moral character who start drinking a lot and who may be there for a football game or some kind of soccer game can get pretty angry with each other. And they each have a concealed weapon. Who knows? Justice Stephen Breyer said to Clement. So let's ban soccer games, and let's go back to 1929 and reenact the 18th Amendment. No more alcohol, right? Otherwise, you know, these people. And let's also ban football, right? Yeah, that would be the solution.
Ban anger while you're at it, because it can be regulated now.
Absolutely. Let's regulate. Let's say that you need to have a permit issued by the state in order to get angry about anything.
Could be a hate crime, Bob.
It could very well be. And he goes on to say, Breyer goes on to say, Breyer's the one that even the Democrats want to retire. Yeah. And there are plenty of statistics in these briefs to show that there's some people who do know. And a lot of people end up dead. You know, you'd think that somebody who gets all the way to the Supreme Court would not engage in third-grade arguments. This is just another recap on if it saves one life, it's worth all the inconvenience. You know, if we just had a law on Guam that every car on the highway had a governor, a speed control device that would not allow it to go any faster than 5 miles an hour, think of all the lives it would save. Yeah. Good going, Justice Breyer. You know, with people like you on the other side, I think it's going to be pretty easy to get a good ruling out of this court. The Department of Justice, on behalf of the Biden administration, started out their argument with a short cheer that went like this: "Let's go, Biden." I mean, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. The Department of Justice argued in support of New York and urged the court to defer to the long-standing practice of allowing legislatures to place reasonable limits on firearms to protect public safety, which is another way of saying, you know, we've been doing it wrong for a long, long time, but because it's been a long, long time, then we really shouldn't change it. The Justice Department attorney, a guy named Brian Fletcher, said, "We don't quarrel at all with the notion that the Second Amendment has something to say outside the home." They don't quarrel with that at all. Our submission is just that to understand how it applies outside the home, one has to look at the history and tradition of regulations. Pay no attention to the Constitution. History and tradition of regulations. And there's a substantial history and tradition of regulation in the public carrying of concealable weapons, including pistols, because of the dangers that they present, and the regulations of that type, of which New York's is one, are consistent with the right recognized in the Second Amendment. Yeah, so let me go back again. I'll find that consistency in the Second Amendment. I better not rely on my memory, though. I better go straight to the text here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Oh, gosh, Brian, I can't find it there. Let's go, Brian. I can't find it. Yeah. So, a little historical footnote. The reason that we regulate concealed firearms is this, that back in the day, in the 19th century, when every cowboy had a six-shooter, it was thought that a man's rights were better protected if he knew what he was up against. So somebody in the bar room insults him, and if somebody's packing a concealed weapon, that puts the cowboy at a disadvantage. So everybody should know what it is they're up against. So if you're going to carry a pistol, you can't conceal it. That's the way it used to be. You cannot conceal it because it's unfair to your adversary. Now, I've always thought that that's inside out, to be very candid, because I know people that carry concealed weapons, and if they don't tell me they're carrying that particular day, I don't know. When I was with the police department, you saw a lot of guys walking around with these bags over their shoulders and everything like that. The average citizen probably wouldn't pay much attention. But cops always have to be armed, whether they're in civilian clothes or not. I think that is much less provocative than people walking around with a Colt 45 stuck in their belt. So, you know, if we're going to regulate something, maybe we ought to regulate open carry. Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about here. Brian Fletcher thinks that the Second Amendment has something to say about carrying a concealed weapons, because they present the danger that the present and that the regulations of that type, of which New York's is one, are consistent with the right recognized in the Second Amendment. Even though I'm a good reader. You know, I actually did some proofreading when I was legislative counsel, you know, to make sure that the engrossed bill was exactly what...
Maybe there's something in invisible ink.
It could very well be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or small print.
Small print, yeah. Some kind of code.
Those sneaky constitutionalists.
Really. Now, we've got Barbara Underwood, probably no relation. New York Solicitor General Barbara Underwood, in an apparent effort to underscore the reasonableness of the state's licensing regime, said unrestricted concealed carry is more readily available in rural areas than cities. So if you live out in Podunk, New York, and it's the sheriff of Podunk County that issues the permits, you got a much better chance of getting one than if you live in Times Square, Manhattan. Because according to Barbara Underwood, Unrestricted concealed carry is more readily available in rural areas than in cities. But she faced a pushback from Chief Justice John Roberts, who woke him up. John Roberts over what he saw as a logical inconsistency in her argument concerning self-defense. How many muggings take place in the forest? Asked Roberts. If a mugging occurs in the forest and there's no cop to make an arrest, is it still a crime? How many muggings take place in the forest? Asked Roberts, who appeared more receptive to the argument advanced by the gun license applicants. Justice Samuel Alito, one of the court's most conservative justices, pressed a similar point. How many illegal guns were received by the New York Police Department last year? Do you have any idea? He asked Underwood, who said the number was likely substantial. All these people with illegal guns, they're on the subway, they're walking around the street, but the ordinary, hardworking, law-abiding people I mentioned, no, they can't be armed. Wednesday's case in some ways picks up where the Supreme Court left off roughly a decade ago. In the court's 2008 decision in District of Columbia versus Heller, justices ruled 5-4 that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to keep a gun in the home for self-defense. Although the court in Heller case noted that the Second Amendment right is not unlimited, the justices largely left unanswered the questions of which gun restrictions are permitted under the Constitution. A decision in the case New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin is expected this summer. Now, if you're a regular tailgater, you know that I was very critical of Mr. Justice Scalia's decision in District of Columbia versus Heller. And I've made the point that apparently Mr. Justice Scalia was blind, because I understand that they took him in for an eye test, and the eye chart had this written on it: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Scalia said he couldn't read it. In other words, he was able to brush that right out of his decision.
Open your eyes, Justice.
Yeah, so it is not a masterpiece of judicature, and it strays pretty far from what Scalia says he is, which is an originalist. So I'm in one of those situations where I didn't like the process, but I really like the result. So call me a hypocrite if you like, because I think the decision was wrongly decided. One of the justices, I think it was Justice Powell, who was a liberal in dissent, said it was the worst decision that ever came out of the Supreme Court during his time on the court. And that's saying a lot. So what actually, this is the real scoop on the Second Amendment. In the beginning, in the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, there was some dispute over whether or not the United States should have a standing army. And a lot of the colonists were against a standing army. But there is a provision in the Constitution that says that Congress may raise and support armies. So the thinking was that each state needed to have its own little mini army. If for no other reason that back in the late part of the 1700s to defend against Indians. Yeah, I know that's a horrible thing to say, but that was one of the reasons that each of the states actually had militias before the Constitution came along. There are 2 units in Massachusetts that are still active National Guard units that trace their lineage back to 1607. Yeah. So the idea was that each state should have these mini armies. And, one of the reasons that people advocated that was in case the national government gets out of control, we'll take them down. That's not the majority view, but that is a credible view. the fear was that the national government would take over these state mini armies. And that's why the language about the well-regulated militia, that the well-regulated militia means, and there are 3 sections of the Constitution that deal with the discipline of the militia, meaning their training regime. So there was a parallel system, the militia and the standing army of the United States. Well, the worst fears of the colonists were realized when in the 20th century, for all practical purposes, the national government took over the militias, because every member of a state Army National Guard is in effect a member of one of the militias contemplated in the Constitution. If you are an officer in the Guam National Guard, as an example, you are a member of the Guam National Guard, which is a territorial organization, and you are also a member of one of the 2 reserve components of the United States Army. The United States Army has 2 reserve components. One is called the Army Reserve. The other is called the Army National Guard of the United States. So if you are an officer in the Guam National Guard, you'll have a commission signed by the governor, and your first one will be signed by the president, quote unquote, because you will be a commissioned officer in that Army Reserve as you were the Army National Guard of the United States. So because the national government pays the expenses for weekend drills, annual training, schools, et cetera, they've got the National Guard by the purse strings. There was a time when the theory was that National Guards couldn't fight outside of state boundaries. We settled that one during the Civil War. There was a time when the theory was that the president could federalize a National Guard unit, but he couldn't send it overseas into combat. Well, the way it comes down is, okay, Mr. Adjutant General or Mr. Commander-in-Chief of the XYZ National Guard, you don't want to do it? Fine. I've got a knife here that I'm cutting through your budget with. So the worst fears came out. Now, to say that there's a personal right in the Second Amendment goes against everything that we know about the Bill of Rights, because the Bill of Rights does not grant positive rights. It doesn't say you have a right to stand on the street corner and shoot your mouth off. That's not what the First Amendment is about. It says Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free, as you were abridging the freedom of speech. So the Bill of Rights consists of negative rights. They tell you things that the government can't do to you. So to say, for Scalia to say that he found a personal right in the Second Amendment, a little different than the rest of the amendments.
Nope.
To me, the only sensible reading of the Second Amendment is to say that the right of the people to keep and bear arms means the right of state National Guard, state militias to exist. But Supreme Court ruled the other way. District of Columbia versus Heller, of course, was an easy one because the Bill of Rights, as a general proposition, protect the states from the national government. Well, D.C. is not a state. So that element wasn't there. In a later case called McDonald versus City of Chicago, the Supreme Court decided that the Second Amendment was incorporated into the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment and ruled on that. So the whole thing, to me, in my humble estimation, is not really very good Supreme Court decision-making, but I really like the result. So I'm not going to ask Tina Rose Mooney Barnes, to introduce a resolution to have McDonald and District of Columbia versus Heller overruled like she did with Downs versus Bidwell. I'm not going to do that. Because if she did, I'm sure that would be the end of it. It'd be over. So going on here with this article, here's a quote from, I already read Breyer's quote. Here, this is from Justice Samuel Alito. How many illegal guns were, I went through that before. Wednesday's case in some ways picks up where the Supreme Court left off only roughly a year ago in District of Columbia versus Heller, which I just explained. So we're looking for a decision here on this New York case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin this summer. So obviously I will keep you informed as to what's going on with that case, the results, who did what to whom, etc. Well, let's take a short break before we go into Zemi Ikotny.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hapude, konnichiwa,
Patois. Ciao. Enter for a chance to win the 76 Circle K World Cuisine Giveaway. Be one of 3 lucky winners to win a passport of free food from around the world at over 15 different local restaurants. Just stop by any 76 Circle K, purchase $35 or more in fuel to get an entry form. Drive by today and taste the world with 76 Circle K's World Cuisine Giveaway. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more details. Some conditions apply. Circle K, take it easy.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-825-5.
Okay, Zemi Ikotny, press the meet the press, right here on Tall Tales. And as usual, I start out with the Daily News, who again is, twice in a row has written an editorial. And this is how it's titled, Our View, Change the Way Hospitalization Data is Presented. Since the emergence of the Delta variant and the latest surge in COVID-19 cases on Guam, we've seen the troubling trend of people who are fully vaccinated being hospitalized or dying from the virus. Public health officials have tried to explain that fully vaccinated people are much less likely to fall seriously ill from the virus. Daily reports about coronavirus on Guam have included standardized rates of hospitalization per 100,000 for fully vaccinated, unvaccinated, and those ineligible to receive the vaccine. We urge the government to change the method in which this data is presented. While data about hospitalizations and vaccinations is important, the government's interpretation of that data is misleading and greatly overstates the effectiveness of the vaccines on Guam. Yeah, let me read that again. While data about hospitalizations and vaccinations is important, the government's interpretation of that data is misleading and greatly overstates the effectiveness of the vaccines on Guam. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that?
There's a mandate.
Mm-hmm. It's because the Red Queen, when people approached the Red Queen and said, you know, the vaccine is not going to save anybody from COVID. And countries that have not gone as hard on the vaccine as we have done much better than we have. So are we just falling into a lockstep here? Vaccine is good. More vaccine is better. Vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. Is that what we're doing, Governor? And of course, you know what the governor's response to that question was? Off with his head. Yeah. Each daily report from the Joint Information Center provides a breakdown of the number of hospitalized people who are vaccinated, unvaccinated, or ineligible. Saturday night, for example, there were 58 people hospitalized, 27 vaccinated, 21 unvaccinated, and no one ineligible. The JIC summarized those results, stating, based on today's data, if we were to compare the two hypothetical populations of 100,000 people each, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, there would be 22 vaccinated people hospitalized for COVID-19 compared to 247 unvaccinated people hospitalized for COVID-19. The risk of being hospitalized for COVID-19 is about 11 times higher for the unvaccinated as compared to the vaccinated. Is this the new math? Did somebody in the governor's office have to take his shoes off to do this higher math? This is not true. The problem is the government does not include the more than 32,000 ineligible residents in its calculations, people who clearly should be counted as unvaccinated. People are either fully vaccinated or they ain't. Including the ineligible population, there are actually 44,388 unvaccinated people on Guam, not the 12,559 people reported by JIC. By using only the smaller number, the government has effectively exaggerated the hospitalization rate for unvaccinated residents. The hospitalization rate for unvaccinated residents on Saturday was 70 per 100,000, not the 247 per 100,000 as reported by JIC. That's still higher than the rate of 22 per 100,000 for vaccinated residents, but nowhere near the 11 times greater stated by JIC. I wonder if Gemma Manglotnia has anything to do with this. I guess if she did, Vince Akimoto would tell us, right? Yeah. When asked why ineligible residents are not included in the calculation, Adelup spokeswoman Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, said, while the virus doesn't discriminate, we know there are some whose increased risk because they are unable to get the vaccine at this time. This is why we distinguish between the populations. However noble the government's motives might be, overstating the hospitalization rate causes the public to wonder if other numbers are being manipulated as well. It's called impeachment of credibility. You know, once you find somebody telling a fib about one thing, then you're certainly correct in being suspicious that he's fibbing about other things. The latest U.S. Census count for Guam, which shows a population drop during the past decade, also raises questions about the accuracy of Guam's pandemic data. Guam's official population is 153,836, but the government has calculated pandemic data based on an assumed population of 168,322. That's a difference of 14,486 people. We need to be able to trust our government, especially on matters that concern our health, our safety, and our freedoms. We trust our elected officials to make good decisions that will protect us. We need our government to be clear and direct. Worldwide, in less than 2 years, this virus has claimed 5 million deaths. 5 million lives. That number is powerful enough on its own. Nice job, Daily News. They must have given the holdovers from the Gannett Day the days off. Okay.
Just a quick reminder, Bob.
Sir.
We are in an executive health emergency, which gives the governor sole executive power and responsibility for what happens. These are her numbers.
Yeah, that's true. These numbers didn't come out of thin air, did they?
Just to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a post editorial here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. We got to talk about the vaccine some more. information coordination needed to roll out Wuhan virus vaccination for kids 5 through 11. Yeah, information and coordination. Right after the Daily News editorial saying, you're not telling us the truth, gang. It's like a role reversal. It seems like the Daily News in the last couple of days has been more postish than the Post.
Maybe this is a press release.
Yeah, it could be. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has given the green light for vaccinating children 5 through 11 against Wuhan virus. Now it's up to Guam's Department of Health and Social Services to share their plan for rolling out the vaccination for our kids in an organized fashion. Public health spokesperson Janela Carrera has said that with much of the infrastructure already in place, in terms of community Wuhan virus vaccination clinics and even immunization clinics held at schools for various vaccines, all that was needed was the go-ahead, the vaccines themselves and parents' approval. I just have a sneaking suspicion that the parents' approval thing is not going to be all that easy. You know, and when I step back, I got vaccinated myself. I wanted to hold off for Novavax. I had religious reasons for not wanting to go with either of any of the 3 vaccines that are out right now, because one of them, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, used used parts of an aborted fetus in the development of the vaccine, and the other 2, Moderna and Pfizer, used aborted fetus parts in the testing of the vaccine. Now, the smart money is sitting over there, and the smart money is saying, yeah, but the Pope said it was okay to take either one of those vaccines. The Pope said, who are you, Bob, to argue with the Pope? Well, here I am. I'll argue with anybody, including the Pope, especially when it comes down to faith. And the Pope is the titular head of the Roman Catholic Church, but he doesn't dictate faith and morals to individual Catholics except through a very finite process, and he hasn't used that.
Personal conscience, remember those 2 words.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd like to think that my personal conscience had a greater dimension than some of the folks that inhabit that neighborhood in Rome. So I wanted to hold out for Novavax, but I had to put my principles aside to go to the mainland because I needed a cardiac procedure that I should have gotten a year ago but couldn't because of this virus, etc. And the consequences of putting it off any longer are not really that great. So I put my personal health ahead of my convictions. I confess. I did it. But this is the way it looked to me. You know, you certainly have this religious conscious objection to sticking the virus in, the vaccine in anybody's arm. But then you take into consideration that before a drug is fielded, long periods of testing on humans, controlled tests under humans are undergone. We didn't do that this time. We were in a big hurry to get the vaccine rolled out, so we cut short a lot of the safety procedures. And those who are in the anti-vaxxer camp are saying what we're observing now is the largest test of a new drug in the history of the world because we're testing it on huge populations. And we've done some things that we haven't really come to grips with. We understand vaccines going all the way back to, who was it, Edmund Jenner? The guy that discovered that, or was it Lister? I can't remember. Jenner or Lister, one of the two, who discovered that milkmaids didn't come down with smallpox because they caught a disease from the cows called cowpox. They got a little bit sick, but they developed an immunity to smallpox, and that was the beginning of vaccinations. And we were reminded by Dr. Tom Poole that the reason it was called smallpox was because syphilis resulted in large pox. So it was necessary to distinguish the disease, the pox caused by the virus, from syphilis. So we know how these things work. You take a virus, you weaken it, you inject it into a person. That person's immune system sees the weakened virus, develops an immunity for it, and strengthens your immune system against the real thing when it comes along. That's the way the polio vaccine works, on and on and on. It's not the way Moderna works. I'm not quite sure exactly how Moderna works myself.
They don't either, so get the third booster.
Yeah.
And the fourth.
Yeah, so Moderna does not use that attenuated virus. It does some manipulation with DNA fragments to cause the body to think that it has to develop immunity to the Wuhan virus. So, the naysayers, the doomsayers are saying, we don't know what it's going to be like 3 years down the road, what the after effects of that virus are going to be. And there are lots of reports about bad side effects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when the government comes along, as it does in the Post editorial, and tries to make its case by being less than straightforward, and then, does everything that it can to force people to get vaccinated. The greatest example I can think of is to say that you can't go to your favorite restaurant and dine inside if you haven't been vaccinated, but all you need is just one vaccination. Now, how much protection do you get from one vaccination?
Zero.
Zero. So if I wanted to go to Touray on Saturday, which is my usual custom, if I waltzed into public health tomorrow and got the first dose, I could go to Touray, no problem. Am I any more immune than anybody who's had both doses and 30 days? No. It's just a way of coercing people to get those vaccinations. And we've seen roadblocks, and we've seen all different kinds of coercion, rewards, bribery, etc.
Threats.
Yeah. If you don't get vaccinated, we're going to fire you, etc. And then you take the foundation laid here by the Daily News, and if you're a parent and your child is 5 years old, you're saying, do I want to do that? Now, that's an individual decision for each and every one of the parents. And I am not going to make any recommendations one way or the other. But that's where we are right now as far as vaccinating 5-year-olds are concerned. Now, the other side of it is, when a kid goes to school, he has to get all kinds of vaccinations. And again, I remember my own youth, we'd have shot days. And the one I hated the most was diphtheria. Man, diphtheria, your arm would turn red, and it would be sore for 4 or 5 days. It was really painful.
Well, I want to thank you for being that generation, because I don't think we got ours.
Yeah, well, so, it was just, everybody just took it as a matter of course. On shot day, you pulled up your sleeve. I don't remember if it was a school nurse or Dr. Sorensen, but boom, boom, boom. And then, of course, if you enlisted in the Marine Corps back in the 50s, you would line up outside of one of the Quonset huts, and you would take your shirt off, put it tied around your waist, and you'd march through this line, and there would be 6 or 7 guys in the line. As you walk by, each one of them would stick you. Speed really made the thing go fast. And then when you got to the end of the line and walked outside, the drill instructor would be there telling you to give him 20. Because when you do push-ups, it disperses the vaccine,
Oh, blood flow.
Yeah, it'll get better faster, yeah. So, we've lived with this for a long time, but I don't think we've ever seen the degree of duplicity that we've seen right now. And I always have to go back to Andrew Camacho's theory of how we count people who died from the Wuhan virus. Andrew hypothesized that a person was so despondent that he took a lethal dose of poison. But he wanted to make sure, so he went to Two Lovers Point, and he jumped off Two Lovers Point. The poison would have killed him before he even hit the water, probably, but he jumped off Two Lovers Point He hit the water, would have drowned. If he were still alive, he would have drowned. Before anybody could get to him, a fish came along and devoured his entire body, almost. Divers went in to see if they could find his body. All they could find was his nose. His nose was taken out of the water, taken to public health. They stuck a swab up his nose, and sure enough, he tested positive for the Wuhan virus. Another COVID death to add to the statistics. That's the Andrew Camacho theory, when he wasn't busy doing limericks. So going on here, getting back into this editorial, DPHS has ordered 7,500 doses last week, and they're expected to arrive within the next few days. Carrera added that a campaign has already begun to help children be more aware of what the vaccine is about and hopefully convince parents of the vaccine safety. Yeah. Well, let's take a short break here and we'll come back to Zemi Ikadni.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, here we are, back in Zemi Ikadni, going on with the Post editorial. DPHSS officials have noted that more children are catching the virus now than last year. Yeah, they've got such a reputation for accuracy, right? A situation attributed to the Delta variant. The good news so far has been that kids who catch the virus don't suffer too many symptoms. Even those kids who've been admitted to the hospital with Wuhan virus for the most part have received treatment and gone home. Nevertheless, health officials say vaccine will improve their chances of fighting off the virus and keeping them out of the hospital. Dr. Michael, it's spelled U-M, Dr. Michael a local pediatrician, has joined the education campaign in the hope of convincing more parents to have their children vaccinated. In a video released by the governor's office this week, narrates a cartoon with green SARS Wuhan virus cells being fought off by an immune system strengthened by the vaccine. When germs enter our bodies see germs as the bad guy and makes antibodies that fight the germs to keep us healthy. The Wuhan virus vaccine helps your body make antibodies by giving instructions to your immune system on how to recognize and fight the germ, he says. Just like other shots, your arm might be a little sore or you might feel a little tired the next day. But once you get the vaccine, the chances of getting a real germ is lower, and your chances of getting sick and going to the hospital is much, much lower. Now, we know that, right? We learned that from the Daily News. It's something you can do to keep yourself, your family, and your friends healthy. He ends the video encouraging the kids to continue wearing masks, practicing social distancing, and washing their hands, of course. Wearing masks, that's so important. A CDC press release noted that distribution of pediatric vaccinations across the country started this week. With plans to scale up to full capacity starting the week of November 8. Vaccines will be available at thousands of pediatric health care providers' offices, pharmacies, federally qualified health centers, and more. Quote, together with science leading the charge. Here comes the science.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, this is Rochelle Walensky, who got her wings clipped pretty much, when she she thought she had the authority to do the mortgage moratorium because she's the deputy director of public health. We know millions of parents are eager to get their children vaccinated. And with this decision, we now have recommended that about 28 million children receive the Wuhan virus vaccine. As a mom, I encourage parents with questions to talk to their pediatrician, school nurse, or local pharmacist to learn more about the vaccine and the importance of getting their children vaccinated. Many of the parents have concerns about the vaccine, and it's uncertain how many parents will get their children ages 5 to 11 vaccinated. And DPHSS will likely have to beef up its campaign.
More cartoons.
Beef up its campaign. Candy for the kids. If you come and get vaccinated, we'll give every single one of you guys a Hershey bar, right? And we're going to work with the theaters. We're going to have special movies on Saturdays, nothing but cartoons. But only vaccinated kids between 5 and 11 can get in.
Well, the unvaccinated can get a bowl of spinach.
That's true, yeah. And it will serve them right.
That's right.
Yeah. They're already having a hard time convincing some adults to get their booster shots. More information has to be sent out to parents that will require they work closer with the public and private school systems to ensure parent buy-in. Well, one way to achieve buy-in is to be scrupulously honest with your customers. Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. So, as I go through all of this stuff here, and I'm thinking of the pro-vaxxers on our island, I'm asking myself, would I buy a used car from these people? Probably not.
Do I have a tire to kick?
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll see the information and more agency work being done so we can, as DPHSS Dr. Robert Leon Guerrero pointed out last month, avoid the fiasco, confusion, and long lines found at the temporary clinic in the Okado High School last December when the vaccines were first rolled out. Yeah, that was a disaster. So, if you're going to do this stuff, you kind of got to be good at it. You can't just kind of say, well, we'll have the nurses out there and they'll stick people in the arm and people can just pull in and everything will work. And nothing worked. I've talked before about systems analysis, operations research, and systems analysis. And so far, the only organization that seemed to understand it was the National Guard, which got really high marks on the clinics run by the National Guard because you didn't spend a whole lot of time wasting time. Okay, so much for Demi Codney. Let's break for the big halftime show. I don't think it's going to be a surprise who gets the Blue Star today.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
New Jersey's governor's race is over, or is it? I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Incumbent Democrat Phil Murphy claiming victory last night.
I am humbled to be the first Democratic governor reelected in the great state of New Jersey since my dear friend, the late Governor Brendan Byrne, did this in 1977.
But Murphy's lead is less than 1% of the votes counted. His Republican opponent, Jack Ciattarelli's campaign, says it's irresponsible to call the race, saying the Secretary of State's office doesn't know how many votes are yet to be counted.
The final results may not actually be known until next week because ballots mailed on Election Day have 6 days to arrive to the polling station. So we're going to be talking about this one for a while.
Fox's Laura Ingle. Virginia's governor-elect Glenn Youngkin says he got up Wednesday morning and started to work on his transition. The state's lieutenant governor-elect, Winsome Sears, telling Fox's Hannity it's time for both sides to work together for the common good.
We've got to stop this divisiveness. There's a psalm that I live by. I used it in my campaign, and it's Psalm 133. How good and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters live together in peace and harmony. That's what we want.
But Florida Senator Marco Rubio says unity will be elusive.
The dividing line isn't even left or right anymore. It's crazy versus normal. It's these people that run our school systems and so forth, and parents who during the pandemic for the first time got to see what their kids were learning because they were learning from home, and they're like, you're learning what? They're teaching you what? And then when they spoke up, now they're domestic terrorists.
President Biden says he does not take responsibility for the Democrat election losses on Tuesday. The estimated price tag of the president's social spending bill has grown again. It's now $1,850 billion. After Democrats added back in a credit for state and local taxes and a new paid family leave program. The House could start voting on the package within days. America is listening to Fox News.
Contact Express Financial for all your financial needs. Express Financial is consumer lending at its very best. They also have a host of dealer service programs with quick approvals. There are 3 ways to apply. Over the phone at 637-9834. You may visit their office in person at 600 Harmon Loop Road across the street from Costuless. Or you can also visit their webpage and apply at myexpressfinancial.com. In most cases, you'll get your money the same day.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Startling new details revealed about last week's fatal shooting at a mall in Boise, Idaho.
A security guard was shot and killed at the Boise Town Square Mall on October 25th, along with a shopper. Police wound up killing the shooter, but another person was involved in a crime. 54-year-old Mary Alice Scarborough of Boise is accused of approaching the dying security guard, taking rings, a gun belt, clothing, and other property from his body. Police say not only did she rob the man, but significantly alter the crime scene. She also allegedly kicked holes in walls in the mall and damaged other items. She'd already been on probation from a felony drug charge from 2019. The Ada County Public Defender's Office declined to comment. John Saucier, Fox News.
3 women have been shot to death in Norfolk, Virginia. What police are calling a domestic disturbance leaves 2 other women wounded. Police say they have a suspect in custody. The woman who is in charge of firearms on the set of Alec Baldwin's movie Rust says she doesn't know how a live round ended up in a revolver that was supposed to be loaded with blanks. In a statement released by her lawyer, Armorer Hannah Gutierrez-Reed says she inspected the rounds in the gun before handing the weapon to Assistant Director David Halls. Moments before, the film's cinematographer was shot to death while Baldwin rehearsed a shooting scene. There's unfinished election business in Maine, where a city council election Tuesday ended dead even.
The contest in Portland, Maine's largest city, will be decided by drawing lots, something like straws. Well, this after so-called ranked choice voting was used. The method allows voters to prioritize candidates in contests where there are more than 2 people running. If no one gets more than 50% of the vote, second choice votes come into play. And after computers crunched the numbers, there was a tie between Robert Rodriguez and Brandon Mazer. A decidedly low-tech method will be used to determine the ultimate winner Thursday in front of Portland City Hall. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
So
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Great news, Guam! Chili's 2 for Dining is back. Enjoy a full-on meal deal made for 2 for just $35. Start with 2 Coca-Cola beverages, an appetizer to share, and 2 mouth-watering entrees like the sizzling personal fajitas, the mouth-watering honey chipotle steak and shrimp, or Chili's world-famous fall-off-the-bone baby back ribs. Available for a limited time. Dine in today or call 648-7377 to place to-go orders. Chili's is located on the 2nd floor of Tumon Sands Plaza. Chili's. Savor the moment.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
So here we are, back again after that big halftime show that we all enjoy so much. The marching band, the drill team, the rifle salutes, the card section up in the... Oh, wait a minute. We don't have the card section up in the grandstand now because of the Wuhan virus, but one of these days we'll put it back. That means we're now in the second half of Tall Tales. First item on the card. Let's see what I got on the card for today. I can find it. Boy, I've had a hard time keeping my papers, keep track of my papers, haven't I? Yeah, what I have is AG, the Attorney General versus KEPCO, Therese versus Therese, and Shelton versus The Point, as were the people. It's pretty much the same as yesterday, exploring some of those same issues. So AG versus KEPCO. KEPCO is the name of the company, Korea Electric Power Company, which along with Samsung EC America are building the power plant out in the Marble Cave area. And a couple of months ago, there was heavy rain and runoff from the KEPCO construction project damaged Marble Cave, a place that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and also an adjacent landowner, allegedly. I spent some time talking about that, talked about the common enemy doctrine, the fact that the common enemy doctrine says that a property owner has the right to divert surface runoff water from his own property to somebody else's property with impunity. So I'm going to follow this very closely. However, it looks like there may not be a judicial resolution in this case because an article on PNC last night said this: the Office of the Attorney General has maintained its suit against defendants KEPCO and Samsung, seeking damages for the harm caused in the Sasajan Valley. However, the OAG, Office of the Attorney General, has agreed to give the defendants until January 7 to formally respond to the suit, which is not unusual. You know, ordinarily when a party is sued in a civil case, he has 20 days in which to answer or otherwise defend, file a motion. But oftentimes, lawyers will agree to extend the deadline. It's very, very common that this happens. But this does not seem to be the ordinary extension motivated by professional courtesy, because the next paragraph says, during this time, that is up until January 7, the defendants will provide the Department of Public Works, Guam Environmental Protection Agency, and the Attorney General an assessment of the impact that the runoff from the solar plant had on the freshwater cave, and a plan for mediation and restoration. In other words, it looks like KEPCO is getting ready to cave in, because you wouldn't be doing these things if you're going to defend vigorously. So, reading between the lines here, what it looks like is the KEPCO lawyer comes to Attorney General and says, I think we can settle this, but in order for us to settle it, I got to go out and do some investigation. I'll do the investigation. I'll give you a report on what the damage was and what it's going to cost to remediate the damage.
They're already mitigating.
Yeah, and we're already mitigating. And if you're not satisfied, well, then you can go forward with your suit on January 7th. If not, maybe we can cut a deal here. That's what I see by reading between the lines here. That's another tool in a lawyer's tool bag. In addition to the knife that's so sharp you can split hairs with it, the dung-colored glasses.
You know, in cases like this, I wonder how much of the quote-unquote settlement has to do with public relations and the cost of litigating it versus the actual damage to the place, or if there really was.
Yeah.
Because we're just talking about water. We're not talking about chemicals, right?
That's my understanding, although I know of someone that was asked to send divers into Marble Cave, and he wanted some assurance that there weren't dangerous chemicals in there before he sent divers in. So perhaps we don't know what's in that water in Marble Cave. But public relations and the cost of litigation are always considerations in litigation. And oftentimes defendants who evaluate their case feel like they have a relatively strong case will settle anyhow. Cheaper to settle, better public relations, etc. And the old saying that lawyers kick around is that a poor settlement usually beats a good lawsuit. So once again, I will follow this for the international radio listening audience. And then we go to the card, which is Therese versus Therese and Shelton versus the people. Before I do that, though, let's just talk a little bit about what we expect of Therese and our government to do, our general government. You know, we started out with a proposition that in the very beginnings of civilization, everybody was pretty much on his own. When, civilization spread out of the Fertile Crescent and things like that. And for most of human history, humans were hunter-gatherers who then evolved into subsistence agriculture. No industry, no commerce, etc. If you wanted a pair of shoes, you went out and slaughtered a buffalo and cut some of that buffalo hide, made it into leather, and made yourself a pair of shoes. You didn't go down to the shoe store and buy it. So everyone was pretty much on his own, which I suppose had its advantages, but it did not allow for any improvements in the standard of living. Well, as time went on, various forms of governments came along, and societies realized that there were things that they could do by banding together under some form of government that they might not be able to accomplish if each person were on his own. I gave the example yesterday, roads. We expect the government to build roads. And if you drive around the United States like I just did, you can go to some extremely obscure, out-of-the-way places. They all got roads, right? And the roads are built by some form of government, by the state government, by the county government. In Wisconsin, there's a unit of government called the town. And each town has a town board, 3 members on the town board, a budget, probably 1 dump truck, a constable, etc. And the towns are responsible for building and maintaining their own roads. And it works pretty well. Now imagine if our system were this way, if in rural areas of the country, the only way we could have a road would be if the first property owner built a road in front of his house, and then the next property owner built his, and so on, until we get from East Ipswich to West Ipswich, with everybody building it. It is theoretically possible, but it wouldn't work very well. So people figured this out, and they figured, yeah, we probably should have some form of government. You know, we started out with royalty, the divine right of kings, etc., and got down to where we are now. But philosophers hypothesize the generation of a social contract, that people would give up some of their freedom in order to attain this public good that could be achieved by people working together on things that would be too difficult for one person to do. And that's kind of the basic idea under government, that governments, you know, it'd be pretty hard, would have been very hard for the people of Walworth County, Wisconsin, to fight off the Russians if there had been an invasion by the Soviet Union or the Japanese or whatever. So that's kind of where we are now. So the basic idea is that governments can do things that individuals acting on their own can't do. In order to do that, governments have to have certain powers to infringe on the freedom of the people that they're governing. Now, I want to direct your attention away from that word to the words income redistribution. The reason that governments have been established has not been for income redistribution. In other words, take money from one person and give it to another person. And that's what we're talking about here when we get into this war claims thing. We're talking about income redistribution. We're talking about, let's take the broad brush approach, the Therese Terlahi approach. Therese Terlahi and let's see, what's her name? Amanda Shelton, yeah. Amanda Shelton want to give everyone war claims regardless of when their death occurred. In other words, they want to go all the way back to the day before Liberation Day, to July 20, 1944. And if anyone died, anyone who was a prisoner of the Japanese died after that, no matter when, they want to give them $10,000, $12,000, or $25,000. Classic case of income redistribution. Now, most of the people who were alive during the war and suffered the Japanese occupation are dead. So their idea is, well, we'll give that money then that they would have received had they still been alive, we'll give it to their next of kin, to their heirs. A classic case of income redistribution. So, you know, if you engage in critical thinking, scrape the paint and varnish off of this and look at the facts. Try to cabin the emotion for the moment, right? You ask yourself, well, what did the great-grandchildren of someone who died during the war do to merit their share of the $25,000 that Terlahi and Shelton would pass out? The answer is nothing, not a thing. You can make a pretty good case, you know, that somebody who suffered through the occupation certainly did something, and there's some merit in that. But the intestate heirs of people who died because of the Japanese occupation don't step forward with any sort of a meritorious claim. I did this, or I refrained from doing that, or et cetera. It's strictly a matter of, I suppose, lineage, right? Who you happen to be a descendant of.
Well, how is that going to be defined?
Well, and this, of course, would be one of the mechanical questions that we get into. How do we define that? But I start out with a basic question. When is it okay, if you understand the social contract theory of government, when is it okay for the government to engage in wealth redistribution? And my answer to that question is never. Now, I could be pushed back a little bit from that from time to time, but that's a really good place to start. Okay? Because we don't want to live in a society like, like in some countries where people are destitute and they die out on the sidewalk in front of your house. We don't want that to happen. So a little bit of it will go a long way. But I say on Tall Tales over and over again, what I'm looking for is an effective, efficient government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services on at least a break-even basis, no debt. Now, we could quibble a little bit about, well, what do you mean by basic government services? And there's a little bit of room there for negotiation, argument, etc. But that, to me, is what a government should provide. It shouldn't try to right every wrong, to make every person who suffered an injury whole. And that's what this war claims stuff is trying to do. It's taking money from one group of people and giving it to another group of people based only on ancestry, not on achievement, accomplishment, need, or any other objective basis. So if the Terlahi plan cost $150 million, who's going to pay that $150 million? The answer is Jose and I are, because we're not going to line for any of the shifted income, right? So it's got to come from somewhere, and no matter what the source, if it's if it's Section 30 money, it just means that money would be spent on the Shelton Terlahi plan instead of on highways, medicine, schools, hospitals, whatever. So it's really hard for me to objectively get on the right side of the Terlahi Shelton plan, because what it amounts to is a naked redistribution of wealth based on emotion. And I've described the emotion yesterday. The Japanese occupation of Guam was really hard on a lot of people. The United States didn't demand that Japan pay damages to those people that suffered. Therefore, the United States has a moral obligation to make people whole, on and on and on. Madeline Bordallo having a chance to end the matter and flubbing it, and so on. But here we are now. I thought we had put an end to the whole war claims thing when Governor Leon Guerrero had such a great media opportunity down at the Hakobotan building, subject to the illegal gift that the landlords had given her. But here we go again, and that's where we are now. So the latest iteration, or the latest wrinkle here, is who screwed up. That's what we got to determine now. And we talked about it yesterday. In the beginning, the answer to the question who screwed up was, we've got to have a closed-door meeting. We can go through all of that in a closed-door meeting. I think the Republicans, having been burned once, were now twice cautious. No, we're not going to have a closed-door meeting. We're going to do it in open session. And the Democrats wouldn't yield. The Republicans walked out, and they forced it. So we've got news reports now of what happens next. So one of the footnotes here, I think, is that Democrats are capable of eating their own. I've got an article here from the Daily News. A time crunch at the legislature was one factor that led to the significantly expanded war claims program being erroneously signed into law. A according to officials on Wednesday. The mistake occurred when an amendment introduced by Speaker Therese Terlahi during September's session accidentally made it into the final version of Bill 130, now Public Law 36-59. This mistake has led to a walkout, and 9 of the 15 senators have asked for a public explanation for the error. Senator Joanne Brown requested the walkthrough of errors as Wednesday's session began. This is yesterday. Who in the leadership or staff of the legislature can account to us how this transpired, Brown said. Guess who volunteered, Jose?
Brown.
No one volunteered.
No one.
No one volunteered to respond to questioning. Brown asked that the Committee on Rules, which supervises the legislative staff responsible for preparing a bill for voting, give an account of the error. Senator Amanda Shelton, acting chair of the Rules Committee, said that they were not responsible for preparing a bill. Shelton said as she asked that a portable hand-washing device be wheeled into session hall so she could wash her hands of the entire matter. Adding all the amendments to a bill once the session actually began. When they hit the floor on the agenda, this all becomes under the purview of the Speaker. Don't blame me. You see that lady over there? Or see that lady up there with a gavel in her hand? Speaker? She's the one, yeah. And then, so I went through the process yesterday, and the recording secretary, although they don't call the recording secretary that anymore. It's what is it called?
Clerk.
Yeah, the clerk. Yeah, the clerk and legislative council are responsible for turning out the engrossed bill. It's their job. So then we have a report from the Post. And this gets into the transcript. Language expanding eligibility for war claims in Bill 130 was neither highlighted nor commented on, that it was not supposed to be there, and the comment on it showed only that there was a motion made on the session floor to allow legal counsel to make technical corrections, according to Renee Meno, the clerk of the legislature. She was called before the Committee of the Whole on Wednesday to comment on engrossment procedures as lawmakers continued to discuss how the unintended language made its way into the bill, as well as legislative fix for the problem. The next individual didn't realize that the language was not supposed to be there, Mano said. The next individual. Now, if you're sitting there listening to something like this, and you don't stop the person who's testifying and say, what are you talking about?
That's passing it.
Exactly. Yeah. Wednesday marked the second day this week that the legislature discussed this issue. They recessed Monday in order to get a transcript of statements made on behalf of Speaker Therese Terlahi, which involved events after the error was discovered. On Wednesday, lawmakers spent about an hour moving in and out of recess as they were deciding how and whether to get someone to speak on the mistake. Yeah. Ultimately, due to a technicality, a motion to get the clerk and legislative attachés on the committee panel was passed. Now, legislative attachés, there are 4 attachés in the legislature: the clerk, counsel, the chaplain, and the sergeant at arms. So other than the clerk and counsel, I don't know why you need the other 2. Questions followed related to procedure and what will be done moving forward. And then we've got Senator Brown again. In the history of the legislature, this is very unusual. Senator Brown said during the questioning, 2 or 3 other people were looking at it, and they didn't know. We can't be uninformed, especially if that's our key job. because I'm a little concerned now. I'm being asked to be a proofreader. And unfortunately, probably for the rest of this term, I'm going to have to be for my own sense of comfort, which is totally unnecessary. We have key people here. That is the main job they're supposed to perform. All right, let's go to Wrigley Field and see if they know the answer to any of these questions there.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, so there's a little information there in the media about the prophylactic measures that were discussed. And in the Daily News article, Senator Talina Nelson asked that procedures be adjusted to prevent a similar situation. This is after Meno explained that they were told that the voting would occur the next day. They had to come into work on a Sunday to get the work done, and that they had 2 resolutions to engross also. Now, you know how important that is. And so they were under some time pressure. And the way the report comes out, Mano's not using that as an excuse. It's just, something that was involved.
Point of information.
Yeah, point of information. So then Talina Nelson comes along and asked that procedures be adjusted to prevent a similar situation. If you should need more time, that you don't speak to one member of the body or 2 members of the body, you write a formal memo saying you need more time for engrossment. Because if you're being rushed and we make these kinds of mistakes again, it doesn't fix anything. A mind like a steel trap, right? And then in the Post article, Meno said moving forward, a memo will be produced if clerks and legal counsel need more time. And as far as clerks and checks and balances, maybe additional staff members will assist with the process.
Maybe a 5th reading.
Yeah. Well, the dynamics of working at the legislature, if a member, if it's the speaker or chairman of rules said, we want to vote on this tomorrow, you don't quibble. Yours is not the question why, yours is but to do or die. And Meno and everybody else at the central office of the legislature is an unclassified at-will employee, meaning that, one false move and you're out on the street. So it's really unrealistic to expect anybody other than a member to say, no, we can't vote tomorrow because we won't have proper time to engross this bill. Only a member can say that. A non-member is not going to do it. It's too risky, and it probably would be ignored anyhow. Well, I don't care what, you get it done.
They don't have the gavel.
Exactly. So unless a member comes along and says that, and then, of course, that brings us back to where was the speaker? And where was the chairman of rules as this was going on? You would hope that they had tight enough rein on men who, according to the news reports, had to come in on Sunday to do this. You can't expect a senator to come in on Sunday. You'd think they'd have tight enough rein to be able to have a good relationship with these people and say, the demand is to have it ready for voting tomorrow. I know this is a complicated process. Is that possible? Is there a risk? Please tell me. That's what you'd expect to happen. But, you know, we see it all the time that there's no thought amongst some of the people that get elected that in order to be a senator, you must be skilled at being a senator. All you really need to do is show up and read something that somebody else prepares for you. And, you know, you really don't need to understand the rules, Mason's rules, certainly not the Southern one on statutory construction, etc. So, you know, I've seen people who are really good at being senators. Ben Pangilinan, you know, personally I like Ben. I really didn't like his politics worth a nickel. But Ben was very good at being a senator. Ben always knew what was going on. He always knew where things were going. He always knew how to direct things. Very good at doing that. I'm not going to embarrass anybody by naming any names, but there were some people, you know, that knew as much about being a senator as I do about being an astronaut. And they didn't see it as anything that they needed to do. They had a staff.
They had staff.
Yeah, they had counsel, you know, et cetera.
Well, that leads me to another question: is if you know this clerk doesn't have autonomy to determine whether or not they want to put a pause on procedure, then who gave them the authority to inject this language? Who gave them this language to put in?
Yeah.
You know, because that shouldn't have been given to the clerk.
Absolutely not. So does it come back to the chairman of the committee on the whole? Because,
somebody gave it to her.
Yeah, someone would have. Well, it probably would have come to her through the ordinary course of dealing, even though it was subsequently ruled non-germane. It would have come to the clerk to start with, because the clerk is the repository of all these slips of
like
paper.
in the bullpen, we're waiting to come into the field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give her that.
Yeah. So really unfortunate set of circumstances. And to me, it really sheds a lot of light on this idea of how important members of our legislature think that income redistribution is. You told me yesterday that, was it in the memo that Shelton read that Terlahi said, well, it was a mistake, but it's really what we should do anyhow? Yeah. And then we have Shelton versus the people, $150 million war claims program proposed. So, looking down the road a minute here, I'm going to make a prediction that when we finally sort it out, figure out who is blameworthy here for this gigantic screw-up, and somebody comes forward with a decent bill to fix it, not what Therese Terlahi sent forward. And that bill is on second reading for discussion, that someone will stand up and say, I'm opposed to this bill. Let's just defeat the bill and let public law, whatever it is, stay in place, because then we'll be doing the right thing. And if Therese Terlahi is the speaker, yeah. So here's for Senator Shelton. Senator Shelton and the original authors of the latest round of war reparations are proposing a way forward to fund expanded eligibility that wasn't supposed to be part of the law, but was enacted anyway, by mistakenly including a provision that makes all survivors of Guam's Japanese occupation eligible for financial reward regardless of when they died. The program grew from costing an estimated $10 million to upward of $150 million, according to several lawmakers. Now, of course, if you went to the piggy bank, behind the speaker's rostrum there in the legislature, you'd find $150 million all crumpled up in $100 bills, right? I mean, that's not much. The statute requires Governor Leon Guerrero to submit an implementation plan to senators in about 2 weeks for their consideration, including a funding source to pay for the program. Senators are currently weighing the statutory mistake in legislative session. If lawmakers agree to Shelton's proposal, submitted in the form of Bill 220-36, a combination of local tax credits and federal payroll taxes will be earmarked for the next 5 years as the funding source for war reparations. The measure is co-sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes and, of course, Senator James Moylan. When is James Moylan going to start acting like a Republican?
Can we just back up and this is for war reparations?
Yes.
So who is paying for the reparations? We're paying ourselves?
Again, yeah. You and I are paying for it. And the people, you see,
I'm waiting for the third ring for the circus master to come out.
Yeah. So it's a death reward statute. So if you had someone who suffered through the Japanese occupation who has died and did not make a claim, and you can trace your lineage back to that, and you haven't died, you get some money, right? If you didn't go through the Japanese occupation and you're still alive, you don't get any money. You got to trace it back to someone who died. Income redistribution.
Yeah, and this whole time the other argument, the principle of it was Japan has to pay because the United States said they don't have to.
Yeah.
So the United States has to pay. No, we are the ones paying ourselves.
Exactly.
It's almost like I want to give myself a loan, so I'm going to reach into my pocket, take my dollar bill, and and there I'm now a dollar bill more richer.
Exactly.
No, it's the same dollar bill.
And it's not that we're paying ourselves. Some of us are paying others, right? Some of us are payers, some of us are receivers. We have heard the calls from survivors and their families still seeking closure for this dark time in our island's history, and we know this is the right thing to do, Shelton said. No amount of money can ever bring our loved ones back or erase their suffering, but we have the opportunity to provide a path forward to fulfill a promise to our survivors. Who made a promise to the survivors? Nobody. Certainly not me. According to the measure, Guam-based businesses will be able to pay approved recipients of the new round of war claims directly instead of the government. Businesses will be able to pay.
So they're responsible for World War II?
Participating businesses then will receive a dollar-for-dollar business privilege tax credit it can use against its own liability or can be transferred or sold to another company. So this gross receipts tax at 5% that's supposed to last forever, we're going to let private businesses pay claimants and then have a credit against their gross receipts tax liability. That's a wonderful idea, isn't it? The bill proposes to offer this credit capped at $75 million from 2021 to 2026. The legislature also directs $15 million from Section 30 funds to be earmarked for the program for 5 years. Now, Section 30 money is the kind of money that we use to build things, buy things. It's part of our tax revenue. The funding source is derived from payroll taxes paid by federal government employees and military service members working on Guam, and is paid annually we all know when it's coming, and every governor has got it all spent before it even arrives. If enacted as introduced, payments would be made using a 3-tier priority system. Living survivors who failed to meet federal filing deadlines during the initial round of claims, that's 1. 2, heirs of those who died during Guam's Japanese occupation who failed to meet the filing deadline, that's 2. 3, claimants, regardless of their date of death, as adjudicated by the local government. Section 30 money was also the funding source for the first round of war claims, which was created through Congress and administered by the Foreign Claims Commission. The government of Guam participated, issuing advance payments through an agreement with the federal government. So, what a mess. What a mess. So,
they would also need to they can't move on Amanda Shelton's bill until public law, what was it, 69 or 5936 is nullified?
Well,
because it already is law.
I haven't read Shelton's bill. I probably should have, but it could very well be that Shelton's bill interfaces with that public law. Here's the public law. Here's how we're going to fund it. Could very well be, and then the governor doesn't have to come up with her plan. Yeah, just when you think you've seen everything, something like this comes along and surprises you. Okay, we got to go to Churchill Downs, and when I come out of Churchill Downs, I've got another Joe who wants to talk about reparations. Wow, he wants to talk about something I'm talking about.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, and who do I run into? None other than another Joe who wants to talk about reparations, right, another Joe?
Hey, Bob. So I recall you were bringing up I don't know if I pronounced it right, intested air. Was it yesterday?
Say again?
Infested airs. In regards to who can claim
well, this is what I said yesterday. If there are people who suffered through the Japanese occupation and who have died, according to the Terlahi Shelton approach, you wouldn't be able to give the money to those people. You would give them to their intested heirs, or if they died with a will, their devotees.
Would an intested heir be a blood relative, or?
Well, we have a statute that lays that out, and sometimes it's by marriage, but it's formulated around family relationships.
Oh, okay. The reason I bring it up is because I wasn't exactly sure what Professor McNinch was getting at, but I don't want to misinterpret what he said, because if I was interpreting it right, I took a little bit of offense, because I actually had relationships with 3 of my great-grandmothers. I'm trying to think. Yeah, 3 of them. I actually interacted with them. I'm old enough to have done that. And they lived into the 70s. Well, 2 of them. And then 2 of them were born in the 1800s and 1 of them in 1906. So I'd say I have a relationship with them. And so I'd say they kind of maybe doled over me as a grandparent. So, yeah, I'd say that we had a relationship, and so it was kind of special. I don't know how that factors in, but it just seems as though he was suggesting that it's trivial, or it doesn't matter. I don't know, maybe I was misinterpreting him. But yeah, I think it's kind of personal. Talking about my great grandmothers. So I want them to get some credit for having lived through this Japanese occupation. I don't know. Am I making any sense, Bob, or am I just way out in left field there?
Well, I know what you're trying to say, and you're having a hard time getting it out because it's a hard thing to explain in terms of logic. You know, I had a Grandma Harlow. I really loved Grandma Harlow. She's been dead for a long, long time. I'm a great-grandfather myself. My great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. I never knew my great-grandfather, but my great-grandchildren all know me. But the fact that great-grandchildren had affection for their great-grandparent is interesting, and it's certainly important to the parties involved. But is that the kind of finding that we would use to cause the government to engage in income redistribution? Let's say that there's you, your great-grandparents, you, me, Jose, and that's about it. And you had this feeling for your great-grandparents. How much money should Jose and I give to you because you had feelings for your grandparents?
For that matter, all the other great-grandchildren, right? I mean,
yeah. How would that work out?
Yeah. But for me, the important thing is just to acknowledge their their experience, and I guess if you put it in some, sometimes it's not enough to put in a plaque. I mean, you got a plaque at the Guam Museum with names on it. I don't know if people feel that's enough, but if I don't know any other way of acknowledging their experience other than a reparation of some sort. But like you said, there's
how is it an acknowledgement, and who's doing the acknowledging?
That's a good point.
Do I have to does it have to cost me money in order for the acknowledgement to occur? And as far as plaques are concerned, if you drive up to Nemitz Hill, up to the overlook on Nemitz Hill, there's a marble wall that has the name of everybody who lived through the occupation.
If someone hasn't pilfered it again.
If somebody hasn't taken some of the plaques down. Yeah, my wife's name is up there. Yeah, so that's there. But, that's the reason I started out with this part of the show with the concept of income redistribution. When should the government take something from somebody and give it to somebody else? What would be sufficient cause for that to happen?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a worthy conversation, I'd say. Something to talk about in a public hearing or a town hall or something. But yeah, I mean, and as far as Section 30 money goes, I don't disagree too much. Maybe unless someone can, give me a better the way to look at it. But the way I figured it, especially if people are still alive, I think we should prioritize living people before our elders, our loved ones who passed already, because they can use that money for, let's say, their medical health care or whatever. But anyway, I thought I'd chime in a little bit. Thanks for your time, Kabal. Let's keep listening.
Always a pleasure, another Joe.
Yeah.
Okay, I got another Jack. Another Jack. Drive-through Jack on the line, but it was directed to a question posed by Simon Sanchez, and this is what Simon asked. Can you clarify why a bill that was not passed by the legislature can still be signed into law by the governor? A clerical error in preparing the final bill for vote should not override the actual votes on the amendments and final language of the bill that was sent to the clerks for engrossment. Look forward to your clarification and my education. Okay, so I don't know which end of the answer to start on, but I'll start on the back end and work forward. How do we know that the legislature has passed a bill? Question. Answer, we know because an engrossed bill That is a piece of paper with words on it, and the signature of the speaker and the secretary are on that bill, and they're transmitted to the governor. That's how we know that a bill has passed. The doctrine of separation of powers, if nothing else, would prohibit the court from inquiring into the process engaged by the legislature prior to the enrolled bill. What happened on the floor, what procedures were followed, et cetera. It's, you know, in other words, court's not going to look behind the enrolled bill. So whatever happened in the legislature is a matter for the legislature, not for anybody else. So once that piece of paper was prepared, the enrolled bill was prepared, signed, and attested to by the secretary, it passed. And no one has the ability to go in and look behind that enrolled bill and say, well, it really wasn't passed because the amendment snuck in there that didn't belong and was never voted on by the body. It's one of these things where if you were to weigh correct results and finality trumps. There has to be an end to the legislative process. The end of the legislative process is the enrolled bill. Nobody has the power to look behind the enrolled bill. So once that enrolled bill was signed, it's as much as the law as a bill in which every single I was dotted, every T was crossed, every rendition of the word Klitzkie started with a capital K, which is really important. And there would be no difference between the two. I hope that answers your question, Simon. I don't hear anything.
Simon says yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to. I suppose let's head for the drive-through over at McDonald's. Chow call with drive-through Jack.
Here we are. Yeah, I'm having my dinner down here at Tokyo Mart. So yeah, and like you said, your name started with a capital K on the bill, and the late Ben, his were all small letters, were they not?
He was doing an E.E. Cummings.
Yeah, he was all small letters. I remember that. Yeah, so just to interject and to use your terminology about income redistribution when it comes to the war claims. So this would be the second or third act.
What do you mean, Jack?
Is this the second go-around for income distribution? Because if it's income redistribution, that means also the first war claims were the income redistribution too.
They were, yeah.
Okay, so this is Act 2, probably Act 3, probably Act 4. I think it'll go on as long as, I guess, politics will be here, Mom. I think that's a never-ending thing.
Here's another naughty question, Jack.
Sure.
Is it ethical for a senator to advance a bill that the senator knows has absolutely no chance of passing, but will play very well out in the hustings? In other words, it'd be good politics.
I think that's what I think every minority group has done. They advance agendas that in real time it sounds good, but they know they're not going to pass it. But once they get into power, hey, what happened to those bills? Lowering the GRT. What happened to those things?
Gotta go, Jack. Good talking to you. Enjoy your dinner.
Yeah. So anyways, hello?
Yeah, we gotta go, Jack.
All right.
All right.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
He says he's a winner. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
New Jersey.
Incumbent New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy telling supporters last night he squeaked out a close victory in his re-election bid, leading by less than 1%. But Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli's campaign posting on social media, the call is irresponsible because the Secretary of State in New Jersey isn't sure how many votes haven't been counted yet. Mail-in ballots only had to be postmarked by Tuesday. They have 6 days to arrive. New Jersey's Democrat State Senate president is losing to political novice Edward Dorr. He's a truck driver who says he spent $150 on his campaign. It tells Fox News Primetime.
I didn't beat him. We beat him. The state of New Jersey, the people of New Jersey beat him. They listened to what I had to say, and I listened to what they had to say. And it's a repudiation of Governor Murphy.
Virginia's governor-elect Republican Glenn Youngkin is calling on his state to unify now that Terry McAuliffe has conceded.
There's a moment where we need to speak the truth. And at this time, I think so many people are trying to divide us and tell one group that they should be different than another. And it's time for us to come together.
Youngkin telling Fox's Tucker Carlson tonight parents upset with the direction of education in the state boosted his campaign. His plans include education reform. House Democrats have added a paid family and medical leave provision, immigration law changes, and a state and local tax break to President Biden's social spending bill, pushing the total $100 billion higher. The House plans to start voting on it this week. Israel's parliament has passed the country's first budget in 3 years. Had they not, it could have triggered parliamentary elections for the 5th time in 3 years. Another day of record closes on Wall Street Wednesday. The Dow gained 105 points. NASDAQ added 162. The S&P 500 closed 30 points higher.